Okay, Susan. So we are on this call to celebrate together. Tell me the news that you received today.
So the oncologist had the CT and PET scans, and both showed no evidence of disease.
Perhaps we put this on the front end of the podcast that we recorded a couple of weeks ago whilst we were waiting for all of this to happen. I want to know though, how did you celebrate?
Got back in the car. I just got in the car and just sat there and just started crying and couldn't stop crying. And then I sent a few messages and I got some responses. And then I thought, what am I going to do for tea? And then it was like, oh, I'm actually going to go and have dumplings. I've been eating dumplings for since before I was diagnosed, and they're definitely a no-no. And so I made sure I got some steamed broccoli with it and opened a bottle of Pinot and had a glass of Pinot.
Amazing. I was saying,
Yeah.
the dumplings and Pinot will never hold the same meaning again. Can you believe it?
Yeah, no, it really does seem surreal. And I can't tell you how many times in the last 12 months I've thought about just getting that news. And ironically, my girlfriend who came to Hope for Cancer with me texted me to say, it was this day 12 months ago we were flying out to go to Mexico. And
Oh, today.
yeah,
Wow. 16th of November.
yeah. So yeah, it's quite overwhelming, to be honest.
I'm so proud of you and all of the work that you've put in, the time, the dedication, making it happen.
Thank you.
It's been incredible. Welcome, everyone. I have a very special guest, Susan Harrington. I've been asking for a little while to come onto the podcast to share. Susan and I have been working together for a little while now, and I'm really just going to hand it over to her to share her story. So, Susan, just whatever you feel called to share, I'll come in with some questions based on whatever comes up. But can you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Jen. Um, yeah, I guess I'll start with um, probably over 30 years ago, my husband was killed in a car accident, and I was a widow at 23 with three children. And, I can honestly say that, aside from that tragedy, the kids and I have had a great life. But, probably 15 years ago, I started to get a lot of health issues. Prior to that, I was extremely healthy. I never really ever had anything wrong with me. And, one thing just kept leading to another. Um, I got shingles. I then got Bell's palsy. I had fibromyalgia. Um, all of these things are linked to stress. And at the time, my life was quite stressful. I had a stressful job, stressful relationship because as I'd remarried. And, over those 15 years, I kept searching for answers as to what I could do to help myself. And, I found that the health industry was really take a tablet and that'll fix it. That tablet might give you another side effect, but don't worry, we've got another tablet for that. And in about 2015, I was diagnosed with Graves' disease. I was told I'd need to be on medication for life, which didn't sit well with me. I'd watched my mum have thyroid issues and be on medications her whole life. But it didn't stop her other health issues. And, she continued to have multiple health issues. So I took it upon myself to start researching, looking at diet, and trying to find a more holistic way. And the result of that was that after diagnosis, after 12 months, I took myself off the medication slowly and monitored that for another about 2 years and never had any issues. Until I had to have a CT scan. Unbeknownst to me, they injected me with iodine and it sent my thyroid through the roof. My specialist again said, well, that's it. You've had a recurrence. You can't ever come off this medication. You need to be on it for life. I again didn't listen and stayed on the medication for 6 months, monitoring my bloods constantly through that time, and then slowly come off the medications and have been off the medications ever since. So I already had that grounding of trying to find a better way than just taking medication. But my health issues continued. Nothing I did helped my fibromyalgia. My shingles was reoccurring, which is quite unusual, and had been for about 10 years. Then I'm just trying to think now when it was, in September, I suppose, well, actually, it was probably in August, I did a cold bath and breathwork class with some friends. And after the ice bath, I had a shocking reaction and I had severe headache. They were trying to get me into a doctor. It was a Saturday afternoon, couldn't get me into anywhere. I had some endone at home from when I'd broken my ankle previously and took that, and it took from this happened at 2 in the afternoon till about 8 o'clock at night before I could actually even get my head off the pillow. I was vomiting, I had diarrhea. The people who took the class said they'd never seen anyone react like that. They did see people with a bit of inflammation get headaches. And then a couple of weeks later, I started breaking out in hives. And I thought, okay, I'm done. I need to go have some blood tests. I need to have something done. So I went to a doctor. I had a brain scan done. I had some blood tests done. And while I was there, I said to them, look, I've got this lump in my breast that's been there since 2017. There's nothing wrong with it, but it feels like it's getting bigger. And but it's, they're not worried about it. So I better have an ultrasound. So I went and had all the blood tests, brain scan was fine. Ultrasound wasn't fine. And at the time of the ultrasound, the girl was wanting me to book in for an urgent mammogram. And I didn't really want to have a mammogram. I'd done a lot of reading about mammograms. And anyway, she was so persistent, that, look, she said, come tomorrow. We don't have any appointments, but we'll fit you in. You must come in tomorrow. So I went in and I had the mammogram. And I got a call from the doctor that afternoon, the doctor's nurse, to say that she needed to see me urgently, but then couldn't fit me in for 4 days. So again, I just thought they were panicking over nothing. And anyway, I never ended up seeing that doctor because she was sick. And I spoke to a doctor from the clinic who I'd never met, who told me, look, yeah, sorry, you've got cancer. And, what surgeon do you want to go and see? And I was really thrown by that. And I think I still didn't believe it. And he made an appointment for me, or he sent a referral through to a surgeon who was locally just near where I lived. She rang me that afternoon and got me in the next day. And yeah, I went to that appointment. She said, yes, look, we're pretty sure it's cancer. Now we want to do a biopsy, we'll remove the tumour, we will do chemo, radiation, and put you on a drug called Herceptin. And she went on to explain this drug, Herceptin, had revolutionised the treatment of my type of cancer, which was HER2 positive. And I asked her at the time, well, can I just do the Herceptin without the chemo? And she said, no, look, that's not available in Australia. So I went and had the biopsy because, again, I think I really thought it's probably not really cancer, and went and saw her the next day. And so this all happened within the space of a few days. And she confirmed it was definitely cancer. It was HER2 positive, and she wanted to operate. And so I said, well, look, I'm not having any operation until I have full scans and make sure I don't have cancer anywhere else. I have a large family history of cancer, not breast cancer, but other types of cancer. So I really wanted to make sure that I didn't have cancer anywhere else. So she then sent me for a breast MRI, a full body CT scan, a bone scan, which I did. And she had those results basically within 24 hours. And everything was clear. But what the breast MRI showed was that the tumor was bigger than what they thought. And so she then wanted to go down the path of shrinking the tumor with Herceptin and chemo, and then operating, then doing more chemo, more Herceptin, and radiotherapy. So at the time, I did probably a really weird thing, and I said to her, look, I've got a holiday booked, and can I still go? I'm meant to be leaving in 2 days to Queensland to stay with friends. So she said, oh, well, I don't see why not. You know, it's only 12 days. So after speaking with my kids, I got on a plane 2 days later and I went to my girlfriend's. She didn't know anything about any of this. And so telling her was hard. But then I had just a week really of just reflecting. She was still working a lot of days. And during that time, I contacted Hope for Cancer, who were a clinic in Mexico that I had known about for several years. I'd followed someone's journey on her treatment there. And the thing that I think resonated to me with Hope for Cancer was they treated the whole body and they didn't just treat the tumor. And I knew from all my past illnesses and everything that I had tried to do, that there was more going on with my body and more contributing to my illness. And I had a deep belief that there was no point just treating the tumor. I didn't really understand why at the time, but I just had that belief. And I knew that probably a lot of my emotional trauma in the past was contributing and that I needed to address that. And I don't, I talked to a couple of different doctors here during that time as well. And I just didn't feel like there was anyone that was really addressing the whole, your whole body. Everyone just spoke about tumor. Everyone here talked about just having chemo and radiation. And I'd watched several family members go through that process, get extremely sick, and still not survive. And so I didn't really see the point of it. So I came home from those 2 weeks and sat down with my kids. The cost to go to Hope for Cancer sort of blew me away. I just didn't realize it would be so expensive. And you initially only went for 3 weeks. So yeah,
Can I
the kids.
ask what is the cost to go to Hope?
Well, the initial cost is probably over, I can't remember the exact amount, but it's over like $60,000.
Mm-hmm.
And, I didn't have the spare $60,000 just sitting in the bank. And so I had thought, well, I'll, access my super and I can use my super. And then my daughter and husband gifted me money. Sorry.
That's okay. You're doing so well sharing this story so concisely and the journey. And I just want to thank you for coming on here because I know we've done a lot of work, but it is really beautiful because most people wouldn't share because they don't want to share the emotion. And so
Yeah.
this is almost like when we did your history, right, which we'll talk about. And it's just
Yeah.
like, holy cow, just to acknowledge. And, I asked you to come on to share this because I thought it would be actually a really amazing celebration of everything that you have been through and just to share that journey with others. So you're allowed to cry.
Yeah, look, I, for someone who had spent their life really, bringing up her kids, always putting them first, the hardest thing through this for me has been accepting people's help. Um,
Mm,
when the kids didn't tell me, so my daughter gifted and her husband gifted me some money, which enabled me to book and go. Just before I left, they told me that they'd also set up a GoFundMe page for me, which I wasn't really very happy about. And, because I guess I'd always felt that there were always people worse off than me. Anyway, it took me a while to come to terms with that. I didn't really want to talk to them about it. And yeah, within a couple of weeks, I flew to Mexico with a girlfriend of mine who graciously offered to come. And um, yeah, and I think from the first day at that clinic, I knew that I was in the right place. Um, just the warmth, the hope, the belief that, you have what it takes to heal is quite amazing. And I don't know how to put that into words really. Um, During that time, I saw lots of different doctors, had lots of different treatments, found out a lot about my body, the level of heavy metals in my body, the emotional trauma, and how it really had, what's the word? Predicted, I guess, my behavior through life. And so I did my 3 weeks there. I came home feeling better than I'd felt in months. And whilst it was extremely overwhelming to come home and put everything into play, I had to find places that did treatments. I had to find equipment. Some of what I paid included certain equipment which I brought home with me. I had numerous supplements that I had to take. I had to completely change my diet to vegetarian. Um, so no dairy, no gluten, no meat, no animal product really at all, um, and a lot of juicing. Yeah, it was hard, and I think I look back on those first 6 months and realized that I was just in survival mode, and the progression of the tumor. Well, it hadn't regressed. At one point, we thought it had, but the scans had been reported wrongly, which was maybe a bit of a blessing because at 3 months, I thought, well, this is working. So it gave me the drive I needed to continue. But then at 6 months, when I went back to Hope for Cancer, we realized something was wrong. And I'd had an MRI before I left and got those results when I was in Mexico. And it showed that the tumor had doubled in size. So
Can I
I
just
was,
ask,
yeah.
um, between this is how did people around you respond to your choice to try Hope for Cancer and go to Hope for Cancer? So family members, friends, your specialist team, oncologists, what was their
Yeah.
response?
Well, my kids were very supportive. I've got 3 children. Um, I think that my son was probably worried. I think the one thing that you don't realize when you're diagnosed with cancer is the fear that that is instilled in you. The surgeon, the oncologist, everything they spoke about was just fear, fearing for my life. I needed to get in straight away, that I needed to deal with this now. And, you know, I think initially my son might have thought the same thing, but at the same time, he still backed my decision and supported me. I had family members who straight out didn't support me. And uh, they told me that. They told me that they thought I was being stupid. Why would I risk my life? Why wasn't I just having surgery and doing what the doctors said? And they just didn't really understand it, I guess. And so that was hard. When I told the surgeon and the oncologist that I'd decided to go to have cancer, to try and shrink the tumour instead of having chemo, well, the surgeon was extremely blunt, and she basically told me, well, I was giving myself a death sentence. And the oncologist just told me initially, oh, well, I'm here if you need me, but then wrote me an email, attached a letter that sort of basically said the same thing. So that was really hard to hear. And even to this day, so I did start working with the oncologist.
Can I just ask you,
Yeah.
if it's all right, how did it make you feel to not have support from certain people, be it specialist team, friends, or family? And how did it also feel to feel supported from
Yeah.
people?
I think when it come to the surgeon and the oncologist, because of what I was doing, I didn't really need to have anything to do with them. So I just put them to the back burner and thought, well, I don't really care what you think. And when I get through this, I'll make sure to let you know that I have survived and it wasn't a death sentence, and it was, the best thing that I've ever done. With family members, and friends, it's been hard. I started an Instagram page to tell my story, really just in the hope that someone out there might read it and understand that there are other options, you know, that you don't have to rush in and do exactly what your surgeon or oncologist is telling you. The one thing that I learned that has really stuck in my mind is that for a tumor has been in your body for 8 to 10 years before it becomes detectable by any scan. It doesn't matter what the scan is. And so the urgency to get that out really is ridiculous. You should have time to think about it, to explore, to understand what you're going to put your body through. And, unfortunately, you're not actually given that time. They don't want to give you that time. And I think for family members, I get that their resistance to what I was doing was coming really from their heart. They were worried about me. But it was sad to think that they weren't interested in, or I didn't feel like they were interested in understanding why. And, um, you know, whilst we've talked about it since, and I think they feel a bit more at ease about it, I don't think they'll really ever understand it, you know. I think they've always thought of being a bit more alternative. Why wouldn't I just take the pill and just be done with it? Why wouldn't I just take a tablet and be done with it? Why wouldn't I just have the surgery and be done with it? Because that's sort of how they think. So
Mm.
yeah, that was hard. But over time, I've learned, especially from doing my work with you, that sometimes you just have to accept. You just have to accept that not everyone's going to agree with you, not everyone's going to understand you, and not everyone's going to want to.
Yeah.
And you just need to make peace with that and move on, which, I think I have now.
Yeah.
Although, every time I get to a point where I'm doing scans and things, in the back of my mind, those people are always there in the back of my mind, because
Mm.
it's like I want to prove to you that I did make the right decision,
Yeah. It's so
even though
interesting.
even though I know I've got nothing to prove. It's my body and my choice, but it's still in the back of your mind. It's still, every time I have scans, it's still there. Oh, wow, I wonder what the reaction's going to be to these results.
I think that's a really important part in this share is for people to understand the impact. It's not just the words and it's one and done. It's like it can have this lasting effect. So I really love that you have shared that they do pop up into your mind. And although that probably isn't their intention, it's like this is the effect we can have
Mm,
on people.
yeah.
And you talked about the prove it. And it's interesting because I talk to a lot of people who have got a cancer diagnosis, and even though you say I want to prove it, you also in the same period of time when we were talking about whether or not we work together, is you also had this deep knowing that you could heal from this. And that's something that I absolutely support. I mean, I say to people that this doing this deeper work, emotional work, is not necessarily about an outcome of healing, but it totally is possible. And I will
Mm,
never stop someone believing that. But there is
mm,
an energy in which someone communicates that they know they can heal, that I feel, versus that they are coming from a prove it perspective. So even though you say like
yeah.
you'd like to, I also know that you've actually overriding that is the deep knowing.
Yeah, I think, after the initial shock and the first few days of being shunted into having all these tests, having a biopsy, which even that in itself, knowing what I know now, I would never have had that either.
Mm,
But, you know, um, after that initial probably week or so of shock and going in and out of these treatments, I sort of just stopped and thought, I'm not going to die from this. I just know I'm not going to die from this. I'm going to heal from this. And wherever the journey takes me, it's going to take me. And I've never really felt like it's something that's going to kill me.
mm,
And even when we realized that the 3 month scans had been reported incorrectly, and when I say reported incorrectly, I'll explain. My tumor is a irregular shape, and so it just was measured on a different in different areas, which reflected a reduction when it actually had grown. So even when that happened, I still, for a split second, I was like, "Wow, did I make the wrong decision?" And then I was like, split second, no, actually, I didn't. I feel fitter, healthier, more vibrant than I have felt in 20 odd years.
mm,
And I know my body is better for everything that I've done. Instead of if I'd have gone down the path of chemo, radiation, the damage that that potentially would have caused me. And I knew my body was just not in a state. I'm at a point now where my shingles seems to have gone, my fibromyalgia has gone, um, and it's just gone 12 months since my diagnosis, and I'm really astounded. Like, I'm astounded by what I've achieved in that 12 months. And we did an ultrasound probably 2 months ago now, and my oncologist was totally shocked. Um, the tumor seems to have reduced by about 70%. Um, and that's occurred. So when I got back from Mexico, I realized that whilst everything I was doing was benefiting my body and I was feeling great, I needed to add something else to this protocol, um, because the tumor wasn't responding. And um, So I'd been researching a couple of things, and I'd actually just started with a new doctor before I went to Mexico. And he'd asked me in our first consultation why I wasn't on Herceptin. And I said to him, well, it's not available in Australia unless you have chemo, and I don't want to have chemo. And he said, well, that's not actually true. Just let me double check that. So he double checked it. And he said, no, Susan, that's not true. You know, if you contact your oncologist and ask her the question. So while I was away in Mexico, I emailed her and she responded and said, oh, no, you can have it without chemo. We just prefer not to do it. And, you know, to me, that was really disappointing because I thought, wow, I'd asked that question within, I think, the second visit I'd had with the surgeon, and I could have been on those, I could have been on that treatment. Anyway, I didn't dwell on it. It was what it was. And I told her, you know, I'd contact her when I got back, which I did. And I went and had a meeting with her. And she sat through that whole meeting and told me really using these two drugs without chemo, you've maybe got a 30% chance of it reducing the tumor. It's rare. It's really rare that it'd do any more than that. You know, and she was quite trying to persuade me still to have the chemo. And I said, look, I said, let's just try it. Let's see how it goes. And you had 6 treatment cycles, um, which I finished the last one last week. And as I said, halfway through, she did an ultrasound and she did an exam, a physical exam. And she was she was visibly shocked when she was doing the physical exam because you can't feel the tumor. And
Yeah.
even when he did the ultrasound, he was having trouble finding tumor. Now,
I think it was actually within the first few weeks as well, you notice it.
within the first, after the first treatment, before I had the second treatment, and they were every 3 weeks, I noticed a difference in the feel of the tumor. And I mean, the tumor was about that big. That's what I could feel. And it was hard. And you could see it. If I pushed my chest out, you could actually see it. You know, if you looked, you could see it. And so then by the second treatment, again, another remarkable difference. And then after the third, which is when she examined me, yeah, you couldn't feel it at all. Like I
Mm.
can't feel the tumor at all. And you
She
know,
was quite dismissive of it, wasn't she?
she was very dismissive. She told me, "Wow, you're lucky because I've never seen this without chemo." And I just didn't say anything. She's never once through all this time asked me what else I'm doing. She's never once wanted to know anything about what I'm doing. Um, and yet it's funny, when I first went back to see her before I started this treatment, she commented on how good I looked, but still didn't ask what I'm doing, you know. And I know for a fact that my body would not have handled chemo at the start of all this. My body was not I was not in a good state mentally or physically. And you know, it's taken this time for me to get to the point where I am. And I think that, you know, if something untoward happened and I did need to look at some sort of treatment like that, if I had to do it, my body's in a far better position now to do it.
Yeah.
Um, I've next week I've got a PET scan, an MRI, and a CT scan. And so that will really give us a full picture of where I'm at. And, you know, personally, I'm hoping that I have no evidence of disease.
Hmm.
um, you know, and I feel like I have none. You know, as I said, I just feel really good. And so, whilst it's been a long path and it's been an extremely expensive path, I've been grateful for the fact that I've literally been healthy through the whole thing. You know, I've had a couple of minor side effects, but really, my body's like just been in the best condition it's been in 20 odd years. And so the power of food, what we put into our body, what we put on our body, our mind, our mental attitude, how we deal with stress and trauma. I mean, for me, that's probably been the biggest shift for me through all of this has been working with you and understanding how detrimental my stress levels have been over the years, and the way I dealt with trauma. I don't uh, kick myself for that because, I survived. I did what I needed to do. But I understand now the toll that that took on my body and, all these things that I had over the last 15 years were just my body trying to tell me, you need to do something else. You need to work on something else. But I hadn't found that. And I think Hope for Cancer was the start of finding that. And the counselor I worked with there, it was quite funny because the first couple of days there, everyone was talking about the fact that we had to have this appointment with this counselor and no one wanted to do it. And, we'd only known each other for a couple of days, but it was the one thing we all had in common. And I think every one of us, though, walked out and went, wow, that was amazing, because it was nothing like any counselor I'd seen before. I'd seen counselors before, but her whole, interestingly enough, Jen, she did exactly what you did at the start and just asked for my full history. And
So you've gone through that twice now, which
twice.
is pretty big.
And twice I've been shocked at my history because there's just so much you forget about. And, I remember when I left Hope for Cancer and I thought, wow, how am I going to keep doing this? How am I going to keep doing that work? Because I knew then, after seeing her once a week for 3 weeks, that that's what I needed, that was going to be the key to me unlocking all this trauma in my body. And we part of the program was you worked with a different counselor through Zoom when you got back, and I don't know, I can't remember how. I think for 3 months, and I found those sessions to just be a bit more like the counseling sessions I'd seen. I'd blurt out things that had upset me, things like how my family were dealing with it, et cetera, et cetera. And, they would help me deal with those emotions. But I, I always just had this, but there's nothing permanent there. There's nothing to teach me how to work through this myself. Like, am I going to have to constantly rely on someone all the time? And anyway, there's a girl on Instagram that I was following, and she had the same breast cancer as me. She was from New Zealand. Amazing story.
It's Cynthia
Cynthia,
Mansfield.
yes, cured of breast cancer, I think, within like 12 months. But her
Yeah.
story was amazing. And she posted that she was doing a podcast and couldn't believe she was doing a podcast because, never something she thought she would do. And I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Hang on. And it was an older post that I'd seen. So I was like, hang on, where have I missed that? So I go back and then I found her post where she posted the link to the podcast. And obviously it was with you. And I listened to the podcast and I resonated so much with that whole thing. And I thought, wow, this is what I'm looking for. Like, this is the person I need to work with. And ironically, at the time, so I got on your website and I think I filled out the form. And at the same time, my youngest daughter was talking to me about working with someone on emotions. And she'd been talking for a few weeks about it. And I never got into the detail of it with her. I just said, well, that's great. That's fantastic. I need to do a similar thing. Anyway, I think it was after you and I had our initial, like had our first call just for you to see whether I was the right fit and you were the right fit for me. I remember going over to my daughter Lauren's and saying, wow, I just had this amazing call this morning with this woman, and I'm going to start working with her. I just think it's exactly what I need and what I've been looking for so many years. And she goes, all right. And she goes, like, what does she do? And so I just started talking more about our conversation. And she said, Mum, is that gin? And I said, yeah, that's a name. How do you know? And she goes, oh, no way. She said, that's who I've started working with. And so without us realizing, we had both been talking to you and she'd actually started the work with you. And yeah, it was just the most bizarre thing. It was just so bizarre. And
I love that. Just the serendipity. That's like, it's all
yeah,
meant to be.
yeah, exactly. It was like it was meant to be. And yet we'd both found you through completely different avenues. And, that were not connected at all. And I just think that, that has been probably the biggest catalyst for me in dealing with everything and continuing on this health journey um, has been the work that I've done with you. And I'll be forever grateful for that because I have such better understanding of myself now and of my habits and of how important it is to receive as well as give and how important it is to communicate. I'm still a work in progress. You can't change those things overnight, but, you know, the tools that you teach, the release tools, I think I've just found amazing. And
You've been incredible at implementing it. Because I always say there's going to be homework to do, and I want to
yeah,
hear from you. And I actually said to Lauren, I was like, your family, because I've worked with a few
yes,
of you now, and your family, I was like, your family are just so good at doing the releases. Like you pick it up, you do the work, you're in your head at the start, but then you get into your body and then you just
mm,
receive everything that you need to. And I am barely having to give you feedback on it, but I always like to check, what
mm.
you're getting from this. And yeah,
Yeah, I think from the first time we started doing releases, as nervous as I was, and I was a bit frightened as to where is all this going. It was such, you know, I knew it was going to go deep, but some of the things that came out surprised me. Others didn't, but I just, after every session that we had in our one on ones, I just found so much benefit from it. I found so much relief, and I was able to then continue those practices in my day to day life. And, you know, it's been, well, I think on November the 17th, it'll be 12 months since I started at Hope for Cancer. And, the protocols are long and hard some days, and you don't want to do them. But I look back and I think, wow, I don't even know where I got that strength from to do it. I do a minimum 6.5 hours a day in treatments. That can go up to 9, 10 hours a day, depending if I'm doing things outside of home. So if I'm doing IV treatments or oxygen therapy treatments, things like that. So, the days can be long, but my work with you has helped me realize that I have to bring joy into these days as well. And I have to find the time and I have to prioritize that. And again, for me, that's been hard because
because the other
I
thing
don't,
that really changed for you was you were so strict and rigid with this routine, like it must happen. And then
yes,
during our time together, something that was really relieving for you was, you know, if you had a great day and you found joy and you went to the beach or you
yeah,
just did something that you wanted to that filled your soul, you realized that that was more important than doing a treatment. So it didn't
yes.
all of a sudden become like my life depends on all these treatments, and that
No,
if I have time to
and
do them, I'll do them.
I think that was a part of, they did tell you that at Hope for Cancer as well, that you still
Right.
had to live, but it was a part of it that I just, had gone right out of my head. I was so fixated when I got home in sourcing the treatments and the equipment that I needed at home, or where I could do it outside of home, how I was going to afford it. I mean, the financial pressure was massive. Um, and, you just became so fixated on that. I would say to the kids, oh, no, I can't, they would want me to come over for lunch. And I can't do that. No, I don't have time. I mean, how am I going to fit that in? And, at some point, I think I was probably quite forthright with them on that. And then I realized after a while that, they started making this effort to come over and visit me on a Sunday. And I realized that, well, it was because I was being so dogmatic about my treatments that they thought, well, it's the only time we're going to see you. It was if we come to your house on a Sunday. And I was like, I think, and I was working with you at the time, and I think at some point I thought, wow, this is ridiculous. Like I need to find a balance. And um, yeah, and so I started accepting invites out with friends for lunch, or going to the kids and I all meeting up and having lunch, or meeting up in the park. I started doing these things regardless of what day it was, regardless of what treatments I had. And, miraculously, I still was able to fit those treatments in. And I
Mm.
fitted them in without any thought process, without any. That was the weirdest thing for me. Like, I'd get to the end of the day and I'd think, wow, what a great day. And then I'm like, actually, I actually still did everything. I still did everything that I was needed to do today in those treatments. But I did it without thinking about it, without stressing about it. And I'd learn, I think, to just go a lot more with the flow and accept that, okay, on those odd days that I don't get it done, I don't get it done.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yes.
That's okay. And, really, I mean, what I'm doing is a lot. And, I don't think I'd still be able to do it now if I hadn't learnt that lesson.
Mm. There's quite a few things that I want to pick your brains about. So the shingles and the fibro, because shingles is something that I've noticed in a lot of the clients that I've worked with who have had cancer experiences or having them, is that they seem to get recurrent shingles. Now, you had that for a long time before you even got diagnosed by the cancer.
Yeah.
But for me, that was a bit of a breakthrough when we did a bit of a reflection. And because that was one of your main issues was fibro, shingles, the breast cancer as well. And then you were just like, actually, I can't even see the marks, and because you were getting some
Yeah.
scarring from it as well. So just tell me a little bit about the shingles.
Well, at the time I got the shingles, I was, yeah, in a job that was really stressful. And it was stressful, not so much the work was stressful, the environment was stressful. And looking back, it was really quite toxic. And, but I, I don't know why I stayed in it. I stayed in it, even though, I knew that it was toxic, even though I knew it was running me down. And when I got the shingles, looking back now, I'm like, wow, that's all the stress that I was
Yeah.
under. And when it kept reoccurring, I kept thinking, well, how, I'm just going to have to live with this because no doctor could give me any solution. And I kept saying, but, what's this going to be doing to my body? This has to be damaging my body. And, no one could give me any solution. No one could give me any treatment. I was put on antiviral drugs, which helped control the rashes a bit. But then I found over time I got really sick in my stomach and had then a lot of stomach issues. And so I eventually took myself off them. But now, and I could pinpoint a breakout of shingles. I could pinpoint the stressor that led up to that breakout of shingles.
Mm.
But I didn't know how to deal with that. I didn't know how to stop that from happening. And I think that realization made me realize there's so much more I need to do. And that was before I even got cancer. Um, and, but I just didn't know where to look. I didn't know where to find it. And not one doctor spoke to me about stress, not one book, that was go home, go to bed and rest for a few days. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, but that doesn't change life. And I think during that time, I decided to separate from my second husband. We just had issues that we couldn't reconcile. And I also knew that that was a trigger, still living in that environment, and feeling helpless that I couldn't fix what needed to be fixed was also a trigger. And so, yeah, it's sort of, I don't know. I just, when the realization when you and I were talking one day was like, well, actually, yeah, I don't know. When was the last time? Because I'd started documenting when I, would have a breakout. And interestingly enough, since I started on all of this, all these supplements, all of this change in food, etc., what I did notice is if I had a breakout, it was really small.
Mm.
And the rash would last maybe a week, but it was really small, never got to anything big. Yes, it was still painful, but each time it was less and less. And then I think when you asked the question about it, I was like, oh, actually, I don't even, I had to look up when the last time was that I'd had it. And yeah, and it just seems to have gone.
And that's what I think the power of the emotional work is. And you've got a story around the fibro as well, is that it's recognizing, okay, there were the stress triggers, but then we dived into the emotion, the events, the emotions that weren't processed, and we use the release process. And that's when the nervous system starts to relax and starts
Yeah,
to respond. And it no longer has to manifest these symptoms because we then went into interpreting the location and what that might indicate as the root. Now, you also really interesting story about your fibromyalgia, which you had been diagnosed and experienced and labeled yourself with it for
yes,
many years, and
yeah.
like it's gone. So
I
what
know. I
happened?
mean, it's another thing that really they told me that there was nothing that could be done. They don't know why people get it. It's just basically bad luck. And
You used to get a intense pain down your leg, and it was during our time working together you realized it was actually the call before we even started to work together. It was just
yeah,
deciding whether or not we are a good
yeah,
fit or not. You then were able to maybe months later recall your reaction that you had after that free
yes,
call.
yeah, correct. And look, it's interesting because my fibromyalgia, to put it simply, was I would go to bed in pain somewhere and I would wake up in pain somewhere. And it did not matter what I did. Probably the most relief I got from it was taking CBD oil, um, because it just seemed to calm it down. And whilst the pain was there, like a dull toothache, it wasn't severe. And so I slept better and, life was easier. But I think by the time you and I, when we had that first call to see that if we were the right fit, at that point, I had had like a sciatic pain down my leg, for months, like I would say 12 months or more. I had been to anyone and everyone, osteo, chiropractor, physio. I'd had a scan done of it. Nothing. They could not find anything wrong with me, but no one gave me any relief. And, I think I brought it up to you during that first discussion. And then one session we had, and it was only like 2 or 3 sessions in, I remember just thinking later that day, oh, wow, that pain in my leg is just gone.
Or I know I won't mention what it was related to, but we
No.
spoke about someone
Yes,
specific
we spoke about, I did a release on someone,
and then the
and
pain amplified.
yes, and I was like, wow, still thought, oh, that'll probably come back because I've just had it for so long. And it slightly came back weeks and weeks later when that same person came up. And we did another, it came up actually whilst, you gave me a task to do on that person. And so we didn't do a release in the thing. And I felt that pain come back slightly. And I was like, wow, could this be connected? Like, this is so bizarre. And so I did the homework you gave me. I didn't do it that day, actually. I think I did it the next day. And yeah, I've never really had that pain back in my legs since.
Incredible. I love it.
Yeah. You
These are the
know,
stories like I've got, people have got to hear it from the person who's experienced
yeah,
it. Fibromyalgia, you get told there's nothing you can do, or naturopaths tend to do some work around it. But I didn't even touch you. You did the work yourself, you trusted it, and you were able to make that link like, oh my gosh, is this pain related to this person and this experience?
yeah.
And because we had some repeated patterns, it was like, yeah, probably, let's see what happens. And now it's like, you don't have it anymore.
No,
It's amazing.
no. And I was just saying to my son, to Chris and to Bianca the other day that, even if I get a little bit stiff or, my back feels a little bit tight, I do not get the pain like I used to get. I don't go to bed in pain anymore. I don't wake up in pain anymore. I just don't have it.
Mm,
And, to me, that's been an amazing, like having those things which you're told are autoimmune and, you're told it's genetics, you're told all of these things, but then realizing that really if you just deal with your emotions and you learn how to recognize that stress in your body and release it, just how you won't, like, those things will just go,
yeah.
you know. So that's been amazing. And I think for me also is knowing that I now know those techniques. So if I'm feeling overwhelmed about something, I know I've got techniques on dealing with that.
Yeah. Because we've gone through many, many variations, right?
Yes,
We've spoken and we've released on people, you've released on people, you've released on body parts, you've
yes,
released on the tumor, you've built a relationship with the cells. And, you taught me something really fascinating about the stem cells. I actually learned a lot about cancer from you. And this is where I say the person going through the experience is often more of an expert
yeah,
in it because especially you're just so invested in learning we went into your human design, you're the one line, the investigator that loves to like find out all the details and understand. But it was incredible as well to take you through some processes and connect in with the vision that was coming up for you, the imagery that was coming up for you. And we also did that in regards to the Herceptin, um, you know, having a positive impact and trusting that your body is able to detoxify everything else. Because one of my approaches is I am all for the conventional if as long as it's a grounded decision and you feel good about taking it. And so I love that even before we worked with one another, you said, I don't want to do this. And you're such an advocate for yourself, saying, I want to do this instead. I'll take and leave the bits, I'll take the bits that are good and I'll leave what doesn't work. You still maintain this relationship with your oncologist, and you had to come to a grounded decision around the Herceptin, around that the IV treatment. And I think, other things that came up in your mind, because initially it was like, I want to take the natural approach, but you just needed time and you need a little bit of
yeah,
coaching and to come to peace with it. And as you said, like your body probably was not in a state to be able to cope with that treatment. And so we will never know that, right? But I agree with you is that physically and mentally, if you don't agree with something, if
mm,
you're so overwhelmed, then how is that going to be effective? So if we're taking herb supplements or conventional medication, chemical medication, I'm all for how can we make sure it's most effective. And the belief that we have around it and the decision, the grounded decision we make around it is going to have a huge impact. And then we went into, because some people say, I'm going to take it, but they've got this belief that it's going to damage their body.
mm,
I say, well, how about we try and build a relationship with this drug, this medicine that you're going to take that's going to help you, but still do the deeper work. And you had amazing visualizations come up that you would call on as well whilst you were having the treatments.
I think, through this whole journey, I've learnt so much. Yes, I did have a real stigma against chemo because,
Mm.
I'd just seen so many people that it didn't work for, or that it worked for and they got cancer back. And, even at Hope for Cancer, I mean, probably 80% of the patients that I met there were back with secondary cancer. And their first diagnosis might have been stage 1 or 2. And they did all the conventional things. They didn't know any better. That's all they did. And they were clear of cancer 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And it had come back, but it had come back with a vengeance. And they were all stage 4.
Mm.
And so that, I guess, instilled that belief in me that there's more to it and you need to do more. And the more I learnt about cancer, the more I learned about chemo and radiation, even Herceptin, and a lot of the immunotherapy drugs, is that they do not kill the stem cells. And it is the stem cells that will give you secondary cancer. So that for me was a massive light bulb moment. Okay, whatever I have to do during this journey to deal with the tumor, and you do need to deal with the tumor. And I do believe in a lot of instances, like in brain cancer, for instance, that getting the tumor out is imperative. Um, but it's only the first stage. And it's what comes after that that will give you longevity and make it less likely that you're going to have secondary cancers. Um, Not many people die of their initial diagnosis. It's the secondaries that they die from. And so, learning about that, I've read many books, I've listened to lots of doctors, I've listened to about scientific studies. And, there are things out there that scientifically have been proven to kill stem cells, but they're not part of conventional therapy. And so, if you don't advocate for yourself, if you don't do the research, then how are you to know? And I'm, a beautiful woman who I met at Hope for Cancer, who was there secondaries 5 years after being cleared. Now, she had had a mastectomy. She had done the chemo, the Herceptin, the radiation. She'd done it all. She'd had reconstructive breast surgery. And 5 years later, she was diagnosed with breast cancer again. And in my head, I was like, how does that even happen? Because you don't even have a real breast. And it was in the same breast, it was in the same spot. But unfortunately, they also found a reasonably large tumor behind her sternum, which was inoperable, and some lymph nodes up near her thyroid. She decided to go to Hope for Cancer because conventional medicine was simply only offering her exactly what she'd done before. And in her head, she was like, well, it didn't work. So why would I do it all again? And her journey has been amazing because she spent 6 months like me doing all the therapies, doing all the treatments, doing all the supplements, the IV, high dose vitamin C, etc. And the tumor behind the sternum grew 2% by 2 centimeters, I think it was. And so she was advised by the doctors at Hope for Cancer and her oncologist that she needed to do several rounds of chemo to see if they could stem the growth. And her journey has taught me a lot because, my fear of chemo and the damage it does to your body, she is now documenting everything she's done around that chemotherapy to reduce the damage to her body. And, she can tell the difference in her body and how the treatment is affecting her compared to the first time. And she's doing amazing. The last scan showed that I think her tumor had reduced, it's substantially, like 80%, 70%, something like that. And So it was working, even though they said she had a minimal chance that it would work. And she believes that everything else she's doing with it, that one is making the chemo more effective, two is causing much less damage to the rest of her cells. So the rest of her cells are healthy. Her immune system is, she's just had all the tests, is optimal. It's fantastic. It's just amazing. And so, there's so much we can learn out there that, even if you are in a position where you need to have chemo, like she was, that you can do it without it being so detrimental to your body. And, I don't think if I hadn't gone on this journey, I wouldn't have learned any of this, because an oncologist is never going to talk to you about high dose vitamin C, about fasting, before chemo, during chemo, and after chemo. Like, they just don't talk about any of it. And well, in my experience, they haven't even really wanted to know about it. And so, I do have people contact me on my Instagram page and want to ask me about my experience. And what I will say is that I think Hope for Cancer gave me the knowledge to know that there's more out there, that there isn't, you don't just have to do mainstream medicine. You can incorporate it. There are lots of things that you can do to help your body heal. And but you need to deal with your whole body.
Yes. That's just so beautiful. And actually, something that we had a discussion around, which was fascinating, was around how people don't actually put a lot of weight on their emotional health. And so you went through this journey with me where we really focus on emotions, focus on understanding yourself, but we talked about everything and anything and how it was all intertwined. And you said to me, I now having gone through this work, you can see when people are not addressing the emotions. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you can share more on that, because yes, people are going to contact you on your Instagram and they're like, what did you do, Susan? And you're like, well, this, but also this. So yeah, can you talk a little bit about how you can see that now?
It's quite interesting because, I've met a lot of people on this journey, both, from Instagram, but also from my time in Mexico. And I think everyone that I've met understands how important dealing with your emotions are, right? I think they all get it. But I think, like me, they don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
They don't know how to take that next step and where to go. And, it's funny that, there's people that I followed before I even got cancer, that I used to, that I would think, wow, they're amazing, they're strong. And I still think that. But now I see this underlying emotional thing in
Yeah.
in everything that they do.
Mm.
And I think, wow, you have to deal with that if you want to heal as a whole. You have to actually deal with that. And again, it's just not something that's spoken about. It's not something that's recommended. And the founder of Hope for Cancer has a book, and it's called The Seven Key Principles. And when I first read that book, I sent out to all my family and friends, this book is really for everyone. It's not just for people with cancer, because you need to understand how all of these different things affect your body and can dictate, lots of things in your life. And if you're not dealing with them, as you and I have discussed, numerous times, and I think that's why I resonated with your work, is because you teach people the tools to be able to continue helping themselves. Most counseling sessions and things like that are, you go, you sit, you talk, you probably cry for an hour, you go home, you cry about it for another hour, and then you sort of move on and you just keep doing your things. Whereas, the work with you is so much more involved, and it's developing uh, procedures or ways to recognize things within your body and then how to deal with them.
Yeah. I say it's like helping you understand the language that your body is speaking to you, the
Yeah,
messages that it's giving you, and just know that it is all connected, but it's also about tapping into the life that you desire, your purpose, your soul, and the life that it is here to live. And that's the part that sounds a little bit elusive, sounds a bit woo-woo to people, but you and I now know that in the experience of doing some of these techniques and these tools is that it goes so much deeper, that it
yeah,
reveals so much more to you as you navigate life, essentially.
yeah.
So tell me, gosh, is there anything else that I want to ask you? I just feel like now it's like, what's happened in your life? Like, what has opened up for you? You've changed work or how you work, and that was a bit of a gift I see for you to see that you didn't have to work so hard.
Yeah.
But what's on the cards for you? What opened up that? Because I feel like you at one point were just limited to what's happening in the next week, what's happening in the next month, and you weren't able to start thinking about the future and how you were actually going to live life. But then
Yeah.
it changed. So can you share a bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think for a long time, I think I started my own business. I ran my business, felt like it couldn't run without me. And this diagnosis really gave me no choice.
Can I ask what the business is?
Yeah, I run a property management business and I also do like project managing for renovations of
Hmm.
rental properties. And, you know, I knew when I was diagnosed that I needed to get any stress out of my life. And, the job is stressful. You're dealing with problems most days, and, tenant's not happy, an owner's not happy, and you're stuck in the middle of it constantly. And so I was lucky enough that my daughter in law had a friend who was very capable and willing to take on the day to day running of that business, which she did. And yeah, it made me realize, well, actually, this business can run without me. And yeah, I've been very blessed in that I have been able to take this time to really heal and find myself and not have to worry about work. And so for me, that sort of opened up, okay, well, where do I go from here? I probably am not making any decisions on work and, at this point, because I think I'm still in the healing journey. And, whilst there'll be aspects of that I carry on probably for the rest of my life, at the moment, it's still extremely time consuming and it's just something that I need to put to the back burner for the minute and, you know, get all these next results and work out what my treatments will be moving forward. But in that process of thinking about the future and what I wanted to do, I'd always actually wanted to move to Queensland and live in a warmer place. And, I love the beach and I love the sunshine. And so I started to question whether maybe that's something that I needed to look at and, did. And you and I worked a bit on that. And I came to the realization that whilst I'd love to live in a warmer climate, I don't think I'd love to live away from my children and grandchildren. And I've been very lucky to have a close relationship with my four granddaughters. And I can't picture myself being that nanny that they only see once or twice a year. I just sort of can't picture that. And so when I really started to think about it, I thought, well, maybe that's not the move that I need to do.
And you actually went up to see what it would be
Yeah,
like.
I went up to Queensland. I've girlfriend, my girlfriend who actually came to Hope for Cancer with me. Her and her husband have moved up there, and so I'm lucky enough to be able to go up there whenever I like. And yeah, I went up and stayed with her, and I had an absolute ball. But it did make me realise that I don't know if this is really where I want to be. I think it would be different if my kids and grandkids were there. I'd probably go up in a heartbeat. Um, but they're not at the moment. So then that got me thinking, well, is there something I should be doing here? Because at the moment, well, in no traffic, I live probably 20, 30 minutes away from the kids. Um, but in traffic, which is in Melbourne most of the time, I'm about a 40-minute to an hour drive sometimes to go and see them. So it's not like they can just drop in with the kids or drop the kids off for an hour while they go shopping or, things like that. And so I started thinking about the possibility of moving closer to them, which just happens to be Bayside. So I'd be near the beach, which is where I really feel like I want to be. And yeah, I just had this gut feeling that that's what I needed to do. So my property goes on the market in, yeah, 2 weeks. And that's what I plan to do. When I sell my apartment, I plan to look to relocate over Bayside and just be closer to the kids and grandkids. Unfortunately, one of my daughters is still going to be on this side. But yeah, I think she doesn't have children yet, so it's probably a bit easier for her and I to catch up. We can do things that, we don't do these days with the kids. So yeah, that's where it's sitting. And yes, I have days where I think, what am I doing? Doing all of this as well as everything else I'm doing. But I still feel like it's the right move. So
Also
yeah,
interesting because we started talking about what the beach and being by the water, even when it's cold, how it made you feel. And you started venturing off and taking yourself down to the coast every now and then, these holidays up to Queensland. And it's like, let's go and find out what would it feel like. And each time you took the action, you had a different realization. Like the next step revealed itself. Oh,
yeah.
actually, I don't think I want to move away, even though I thought I did. So I went
Mm.
and found out. And then all of a sudden, I was like, Susan, I'm giving you some homework. Are you okay? Like, what's going on? And you're like, well, I've decided to put my house on the market. I'm like, how did you not tell me this? But what I love is that you don't need to consult me on that. You just was like, I'm doing this. And I was
Yeah.
like, holy cow. And I say that there's quite a few big things that can happen when I'm working with people. A relationship breakup, attracting a new relationship, having a baby, getting pregnant, quitting a job, finding a new job, selling a house, buying a house, or moving. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's been so many other amazing things. But when that happens, and I've realized those are some of the big things, big moves, it's like, oh my gosh, things are really shifting. And
Yeah.
what I love this time is that, well, not this time, but the way you're approaching it is you're like, well, I'll sell my house. And I feel like you're going into a real surrender and just trusting things will land.
Yeah, I guess I am because, I have my moments and I certainly have been looking at other properties and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to afford that or that, but that's what I'd actually really like to live in or where I'd really like to live. And so I'm really just trusting it'll fall into place and that, yeah, I'll get the settlement that I need here to give me the time to find the right property for me. And yeah, I'll end up closer to the beach and closer to my granddaughters and yeah, see where life heads from there.
Well, I love that you're sharing this before it's all landing and just putting your desire out there. That's how I
Yeah.
operate. I just put
Yeah.
it out there, I share it. Someone in the field is going to hear it. And who knows, maybe someone's got a place for you Bayside that's perfect. Maybe someone wants to buy your place in Richmond.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that, in the past, I would have been absolutely stressed to the max about this.
Mm.
I would have been, you know, constantly questioning myself. What am I doing? And whilst I've done a little bit of that, I've done it and realized, yeah, but hang on, what's my alternative? Yeah, there isn't something I want more. And so this is what I want. And so if I want to get that, I have to have a leap of faith, and I have to trust my gut instinct and just go for it.
Yeah.
And it may not pan out, or it may, I don't know, something else may happen, or I don't know. But the reality is, I just think whatever's going to happen will happen. And this is just going to be my first step in to that journey. And yeah,
I love it. And something that I often say to you about your history is like, Susan, you have held a lot of challenges. And I often say the universe sends you challenges to see, can you hold the success energy? And it's very different when something happens and seemingly happens to you, but it's happening for you. But now you're making a choice to make things happen for yourself. And
yeah,
it's just cool to go on this journey. So I trust that it's just going to all unfold as it's meant to be, that you are supported. That's something that we've really worked on, that receiving. And I saw, it's really beautiful for you to share the emotion, for your family to hear this as well.
yeah. I think that, it's funny when I first started this journey, I would hear people say, oh, you know, getting cancer is the best thing that happened to me. And I just couldn't resonate with that. I just was like, how could you say that? How could you say that? But if you're willing to be open, and if you're willing to learn, and if you're willing to keep asking questions, and if you're willing to trust your gut, there is so much good that comes out of this and this journey. And whilst I wouldn't wish it upon anyone, obviously, um, there is so much good if you want to see it, and I've just in the last 6 months have just realized so much has been good about it. And I believe that all the opportunities that it's brought me, working with you, learning to receive, learning so much more about myself, are things that I'll just carry with me for the rest of my life. And yeah, I don't know, I certainly wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't had that diagnosis,
Mm,
right? Because even though I knew and I was questioning and I was trying to find answers, they weren't coming to me. And I don't know if it's the urgency of, okay, this is cancer. Now I really need to just do something. And I need to let go of all my fears.
yeah.
Because that, when you're fighting cancer the way that I've chosen to do it, you do have to let go of all your fear. You do have to let go of your fear, and you do have to trust that it's the right thing. And I think that as long as you're constantly learning, as long as you're constantly reading, as long as you're constantly, people within this sector are so willing to talk and are so willing to open up to you if you just are willing to ask the questions or communicate with them. And I've joined uh, WhatsApp groups from people I've met at a clinic where I do my IVs, and the information that they share and their journeys and different things that they do are all just little stepping stones in helping you either affirm that you are doing the right thing, or helping you decide whether you add something else or do something else on that journey. And they all become a little piece of the puzzle. And I don't believe that any sort of healing really is just done by doing one thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to do many things. Uh, you have to heal. You have to heal your whole body, and I keep saying that, but um, yeah, I think that's how, I think that's how we need to be. We need to do more of it in society.
Yeah, so many people find blocks or limitations as to why they can't do it. But
Yeah,
as you said, it requires you to step up and actually lead yourself to ask questions, be willing to be curious and
Yeah.
not to wait for someone to just like lead you along. And that's what I love
Yes.
about our work together as well, is that
Yeah.
I want you to feel grounded and not feel like you depend on me, to know that you've got these techniques and there's just so many evolutions and versions of ourselves. So
Yes. Yeah. And I think, as
so
I said
much in this.
before, I think that was the big difference with what you do compared to other things that I'd looked at and considered was you're actually teaching people techniques
Mm,
on how to continue the work and grow through the process and for us forever.
mm. How are you
Mm.
feeling right now?
Yeah,
Having
good.
shared this.
Yeah, good.
Did you
Um,
ever think you'd be on a podcast?
no. And I know you asked me several times and I kept brushing it off.
Yeah, I was like, step into your fifth line,
I
Susan.
know. And that was, and it's quite funny because, when we talked before we started this, I said to you, yeah, I felt a bit uneasy the last few days and about, my decisions and everything I've got to get done. And last night when I went to bed, I thought, I wonder if it's having to do this it's doing this podcast is some of it, is some of that. Or I don't know how people are going to perceive it. Or, I find even with my Instagram, I'm careful about what I write because you know, I I sometimes think, oh, I don't know if people who follow me will perceive that the way I'm trying to say it. And yeah, but I think in everything that I sort of have done, I've just tried to be honest to myself and trust myself.
Yeah. Well, this is where I say I want people to share stories like this. I think it's incredible. I've always said you've got so much wisdom to share. And gosh, there's so much more that we probably didn't even talk about
Mm.
today. You've got so much knowledge and you've been through the experience, which speaks, that's huge. And I didn't start this podcast saying that, but hopefully, if people have gotten to the end, is like, yeah, this is going to be triggering for some people, and some people aren't going to be ready to hear it. But a lot of the discussions we've had is just actually accepting and honoring people's timing. And maybe in this lifetime, hopefully in years to come, the message will land. But sometimes they do move through this lifetime, and they'll never get it. Uh,
Yeah.
but the people that need to hear it, just like Cynthia, who never thought she'd
Mm.
be on a podcast, I know she's touched a lot of people. If she hadn't have shared, maybe, well, we would have found each other in some way,
Yes.
I'm sure, but share the stories and the people that need to hear it will hear it.
Mm.
And it just depends where they're at on their journey.
Yeah. And I just think, as I keep saying, there's so much to learn out there, and I'm still learning. And, 12 months into this journey, I'm still learning. Every day I'm learning something new. And, be that from someone else who's going through the same journey or a similar journey, or from a book I've read, or, there is so much hope out there. And cancer doesn't have to be a death sentence, and it doesn't have to make you extremely ill. And, there are lots of things you can do to help yourself.
Yeah. Are you happy for people to reach out to you if they've got questions?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So how do they find you on Instagram? And I can put your email in the show
Yeah.
notes as well.
Yeah, my Instagram, yes, is Belief to Heal. And yeah, if they can message me directly on that or through my email, I don't mind.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
And I always say with this is if you've got any negative comments, do not send them to Susan, especially where she's at on her healing journey. She's still human, although she might seem superhuman right now. Really important. Like we've talked about the impact of people's words, even when they are not intentional to cause harm, but sometimes
Yeah.
in the back of people's minds. I mean, Susan's got the techniques to process, but just be aware that if you get triggered, be curious and maybe it's your own thing to work on.
Yeah.
And we honor everyone with where they're at on their journey. If you've gotten something positive out of this, then I know that that will mean a lot to any of my guests to just for you to acknowledge what you've received out of this, to give them support to for being brave to share. Like honestly, I ask a lot of my guests many times, like, can you please come on? And yeah, there's a few people I still would love to have on here, but I will honor that timing. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so positive messages, acknowledgement of what you might receive. Share this with your friends if you think that they need to hear it. Save any negative comments for yourself and work through that on your own or with someone.
Yeah.
But I'll put your email in the show notes as well if people don't have Instagram.
Mhm.
And yeah, look, it doesn't matter, it's not even your job to have your stuff on social, but what you go through of what are people going to think, how are they going to perceive me, are they going to judge and criticize? Tell you everyone goes through that. And
Yes, I think so.
it's
And
amazing that you step into
I
it.
decided it took me a little while to decide to actually do it, but I looked back to the fact that at the start of this journey, I was in the place that I was at because I had followed someone
Yep.
who inspired me to
Yep.
question and to look at other options. And I thought that if my story can inspire someone else to do that and help them have a better journey, a better healing journey, then it's worthwhile me doing.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to share? Words of wisdom?
No, no, not really.
I think you've already done that. So this has been amazing. Thank you once
Thanks,
again,
Jen.
just for sharing your time and where you're at, what you're navigating, putting your property on the market and sitting in the gap of waiting for these results. I'm
Yes.
sending you lots of love,
Thanks.
and I just know that whatever it will be, you'll be able to navigate it. So
Thanks,
we'll
Jen.
see where you're at.